If you live in Los Angeles, you may have seen or heard Jarl Mohn's name already. At the Brick, it's written above the Jarl and Pamela Mohn gallery, and throughout LA museums, it's in the wall text of works he's donated. You might have even heard a special thanks to Jarl Mohn on the radio for his support for NPR. The former radio personality known as Lee Masters, former vice president of VH1 and MTV, creator of E! Entertainment, former CEO and now president emeritus of NPR. Mohn is now an LA collector of light and space art, plus the younger and emerging artist of the Mach 3 collection, a major gift shared collaboratively between LACMA, The Hammer, and Mocha. Welcome, Jarl.
Thank you for having me.
So you two actually know each other.
Long time.
Long time.
Tell me about that.
Even pre-art.
Yeah.
Because we were both in the television business.
You guys are industry dudes. Sorry,
dudes.
that's how I refer to them privately. But yeah.
We are, yeah.
And then when I became interested in collecting art, I called Dean and I said, can we get together and have lunch? I'd like to pick your brain because I really want to start collecting art. And we went to Sasabune.
That is true.
On Wilshire, and we had a fabulous lunch, and he was very generous with his time and very generous with his advice. And, we had this other connection other than the television industry.
And over time, the art connection proved more durable.
Yes.
as both of us have left television way behind.
Yes.
Or at least the television has left us. I don't know, but.
Yeah, what was that conversation like? Like, what questions did you have, or what kinds of things did you have to learn?
About art?
Yeah, about collecting.
Well, I was really interested because, and I learned a lot, and there were a number of things that Dean said to me at that lunch that still kind of resonate, and I don't know to the extent that you still practice them. But the thing that I thought was the best advice that he gave me, and he gave me a lot of great advice, was, and when I'm asked about collecting from people who are interested, I now tell this to them, look at a lot of art. Dean then, I don't know if he still does it, told me, he said, look, I'm not a golfer. I don't go out on Saturdays and play golf. Yeah. Every Saturday, he and a group of his friends pick a neighborhood. Do you still do this?
We still do it.
Great. So, much more industrious and much more committed and much more disciplined in his approach than I in mine. But, Dean and friends pick a neighborhood, and then they hit all the galleries in that neighborhood and have lunch. And so as a result, I think he sees everything that's out there.
I see a lot. That's true.
I'm a lazier.
No, I've gotten much worse. I'm probably more with you now. Like age has really slowed me down.
You really have to work hard to get as lazy as I am.
Who are your art friends?
Well, my two closest friends are both collectors, and one is named David Hoberman, who's a highly regarded producer who I've been friends with since my days at Disney. He was a head of Disney Films for a while, and now has his own production company. It's been very successful. And Craig Jacobson, who's an attorney and a very good one. And we've been friends for many years, and every Saturday, if we're all three in town, we will head out at 12 o'clock and go to a bunch of galleries. And it's true. I mean, I never understood. I mean, I do understand from a time standpoint why somebody hires an art advisor. I certainly understand why you do as well, because you just can't see. You don't have the time. You have other businesses, and you cannot cover the waterfront at all. But the pleasure. But you also really, really love art, and what I've always found mystifying, and I talk about this to other people who call me in the way that Jarl did, is the great fun of it all is going out and looking at art and connecting with the art and connecting with yourself, connecting with the art and connecting with other people who are there and talking about it and talking about it afterward. That's really the pleasure to me. That was always the pleasure of contemporary art. And that's what it gave me, that's what it gave me. So I never, I always encourage people to do the work, do it. It's really where the fun is. It isn't like a chore. It's it's the thing, you know?
Yeah.
And Jarl was, way outstripped me in his voraciousness and looking at art. But which has been fantastic to see. And I think he's been just an incredible, he's taken that and he's much more than I ever did. He's really incredible benefit to the entire community of artists in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you.
Which he's probably too humble to say himself, but it's really one of the differences between Jarl and most collectors is, Jarl has put his money where his mouth is directly, and has created a different way of philanthropy for donating art to museums that hadn't happened before. He's been incredibly philanthropic in moments that are in crisis moments, and he and his wife to helping artists who were affected by the fire. He's just as the Hammer, which I've been involved with for a long time, he's been a vibrant member of that and created a couple of art prizes that I think have changed the tenor of Made in LA, which is a wonderful biennial. So he's had his effect has been. I mean, if we talk about the collecting, because collecting is always fun, but I think the effect has been what's made Jarl different is that the impact has been much broader.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, I felt I had to say that as my own personal intro.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank
That
you.
was great. Do you want to talk a little bit about your philanthropy? I think, especially in the last couple of years, especially when Mac 3 came out, which is unique in that it's a gift to 3 museums. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to tell us about kind of how it formed and how you kind of conceived of it?
How Mac 3 formed?
Yeah.
I'd love to tell you there was a great strategic plan, and they had this whole thing mapped out, which would be the farthest thing from the truth. It's really been iterative, and it's happened organically, and a lot of it was just listening to other people, as I've always tried to do, to learn from, as I did when I originally called Dean many years ago. I think one of the things that impressed me the most was when the Getty did Pacific Standard Time, the first iteration. And in speaking with artists and speaking with my friends in the museum world and the art world, everybody really seemed to be jazzed about it. I mean, they were really excited about the idea of working with each other and collaborating. And that really resonated with me. And as time went on, and I started my second collection, the first collection was minimalism, light and space, and kind of a little slice of land art. If we had a Venn diagram of minimalism, light and space, and land art, that's kind of where we landed.
A lot of Michael Heiser. And James Turrell.
Yeah. Then ultimately I decided after a while, and after I, and I don't want to, I'm not an expert at it, but I became a student of that, those schools of art. And it ended up being just, my personal experience was it was being distilled down to, I knew the artists that I wanted to collect. I knew the big names. I learned this, what I would call maybe this, not in terms of quality of art, but in terms of market acceptance, second tier, third tier, lesser known artists, those that I thought had done really remarkable work that never had gotten the recognition. But I kind of had a sense of, what I wanted that collection to be. And I felt I had gone almost as far as I could go with that collection. And then at the same time, looking what was happening here in Los Angeles and going, my God, this is really, this I believe is the center of creativity, not just in the visual arts, not just in that, but also, motion pictures, television, the music industry. And it's really happened in the visual arts. And I really do believe it is the center of creativity now. I think it's the lifeblood where, startups are perhaps for Northern California, the finance world is for New York. I think creativity is the lifeblood of this city. And so I became really interested in what was happening with, new, young, emerging or under-recognized artists. And I had this idea that I wanted to do a prize, an award. And so I went around and I started talking to the museums. I talked to Jeffrey Deitch, who was at MoCA at the time. I talked to Annie Philbin when Annie was at the Hammer, and Michael Govan. Everybody loved the idea. And actually, even the Getty at that point, they said, we're not, this is not what we do. But Michael Brand, who was the director at the time, told Andrew Perchuk, yeah, we'd love to be involved. So I figured, fantastic. We're going to do something once a year to try to find and celebrate a Los Angeles artist, a new artist, and really help promote the creative community here in LA. And then everybody loved the idea. Then it came down to how do we make this work? Mm-hmm. And everyone had a very different idea of what it should look like, what it should act like, how it should be done. And at that point, I had no experience at all. I mean, I had been on the board at MoCA. Were we on the same time?
I don't think so. I think I was on before. I think I was on before you. I was on from 97 to 2007 or something like that. So
I don't even – time to me is like –
I know.
So I was very frustrated, and I didn't speak language, the museum language at the time. Right. So I didn't or what the issues were with the institutions. So I wasn't getting anywhere. And I was a little frustrated with it. And then Annie Philbin called me up one day and said, I love the idea. I am going to be doing this thing at the Hammer called Made in LA. And I think the prize that you have in mind fits perfectly with that. And I want you to think about the idea of not doing it as a thing with all the institutions, but do it with the Hammer. Uh-huh. And I said,
that sounds like Annie.
Well, I've got my relationships with these other museums and these directors and curators, and I can't just walk away from them. She goes, it's okay. I've already spoken to them. Oh. Everybody said the same thing, which is, look, it's a great idea. There's no real simple path right now. That fits beautifully with what Annie and the Hammer are going to do with Made in LA. And that began that journey. And I mean, one of the learnings for me was not only is this a great center of creativity, in my view, the center of creativity, but I found out what a remarkable community there was. So we had this idea of a $100,000 cash prize, unrestricted, to a young, emerging. I know emerging is a difficult word.
Yeah,
but
not well known.
Not well known. And the Artist Council at the Hammer came back, and he let me know. They thought this was a terrible idea. Mm. This was I said, giving one artist $100,000 unrestricted to do whatever they want to do is a bad idea. It's going to destroy the community. It's going to pit artists against each other. We're going to be competing with each other. And I said, you're competing with each other already. When you're competing for galleries, you're competing for collectors, you're competing for, if you're in the Made in LA show, you're competing for gallery space. How many works are you going to be able to get up? And at any rate, Annie invited me to come speak to the Artists Council, and I heard how concerned they were. I didn't understand it at the time. One of the proposals was, don't give all that money to one artist, split it up. And the very first Made in LA, I think there were 63 artists. I said, well, it's not going to have a significant impact on anyone's life. Yes, but it'll be more fair. So we went back and forth. And I finally said, look, what will it take for you to be happy about this? I mean, including going away. But I think this is a good thing for the community. And we had a great discussion. There might have been 15 or 20 artists in the room. The meeting went on and on and on. And they said, well, we don't think you should have one. We think there should be some additional prizes. maybe I don't think they use the term legacy artist, but someone that's been making art for a long period of time that's been unrecognized. I said, great, we'll do that. This public choice where people could vote for one, we'll do that. And then we'll have the big prize, and we'll have jurors make a creative decision about what's the best, most interesting, advanced work in the show. So I ended up kicking in more money, $100,000 for that prize, $25,000 for each of the two others, so an additional $50,000. Many of them didn't want me to call it a prize. They wanted it to be called an award. I thought that was kind of funny because they said a prize is what a child gets. I said, oh, you mean like the Nobel Prize, the Pulitzer Prize, But I said, look, if that's how you feel, whatever it's going to take, let's make this work. But I really got a sense of the community then. And one thing led to another. And of course, I think Made in LA has turned out to be a really remarkable thing for the Hammer, for the city of Los Angeles, for the community of art. And from that, I started building this other collection beyond minimalism and light and space of young or under-recognized LA artists. And it grew to the size of, close to 350, 400 works, and then was trying to make the decision of what I was going to do with the collection. The plan was ultimately to give it away down the road, but I said, let's do it now. And I began conversations with Annie, with Michael Govan, at LACMA, and Johanna Burton was at MoCA at the time. And, the idea surfaced of, this can be a project, a community project, back to the idea of community. Each museum has its own approach to collecting contemporary art. Each museum has its own approach to collecting emerging art. Each has its own program for collecting LA artists. Wouldn't this be a great thing? Don't touch that. Do what you're going to do. Stay on that course. But let's make this a community project and not just have it as a collection, but I've endowed it so that every year all the directors and the curators from all three museums meet with me and we look at what they're proposing and we just acquired, we haven't announced what they are yet, we just acquired 12 works from Made in LA.
Oh, exciting.
And we'll be announcing those shortly. So it's a community project and it's so much fun to walk through the museum with the three directors and the three curators and then go downstairs and have a lunch and argue and discuss and debate for 2-3 hours about what should come into the collection.
Yeah, it sounds like as a collector, especially when you're involved in the museums and things like that, there's a degree you have to play ball. You have to negotiate. You have to kind of push and pull. Do you feel like coming from and this is a question for both of you, are there skills that you learned in your other life that come in handy when you're kind of negotiating in the art world?
I don't know. I never had much skill at that to begin with. I managed to not get along with most of the people on the board at MoCA when I was there because, these fights can be these conversations can devolve into fights very easily, and particularly when you're dealing with limited resources. Do I acquire this or do I acquire that?
Yeah.
Who's for this? Who's for that? And there's I'll get back to Jarl's thing in a second because I think it's really important in that way. There's an inherent conflict on boards, and that conflict is I own this work, and I want you to validate me because I own this work in my collection. Mm-hmm. I want you, the curator of the museum, to validate me by acquiring another example because it gives me legitimacy and it increases the value of what I have, and either in terms of legitimacy or financially in most cases. I think it's a really, I don't know how to get around the system. I think it's profoundly corrupt, and it's something that it just bugged me always and always rubbed me the wrong way. And I saw it playing out, and I won't go into specifics, but I saw it playing out in my membership on these boards many, many, many times, and it bugged me every time. I think one of the nice things Jarl has done is he sort of sucked some of that. He sort of sucked away some of that ability for boards and acquisition committees to do that, and by really concentrating it in a group of people who are, I won't say disinterested, but are really more objective about the needs of the institution and the needs of the community, which is, say, the directors of it and you. But I take your good intentions as a given. So, I think it's a really great way for them to acquire emerging work, because I just saw a lot of crap go down in my time. And I mean, obviously we acquired wonderful things as well at the Hammer and at MoCA. But there was a lot that went down that really was unappetizing. I think this really steers the conversation in a good way.
Well, thank you, Dean. And there's no commercial interest on my part. I don't sell work. I've never sold work, and so I'm not trying to get the institutions to acquire a particular piece so I create more value over here. I've given that collection, the entirety of it, all of it, to the three institutions, and there aren't arguments. The things that, and again, we're very early. This whole is subject to change in human nature, and as the players change over time. But the meetings are so much fun because I get to listen and I get to learn from the directors of all three museums and the chief curators for all three museums, the curatorial teams. They meet well in advance of meeting with me. They talk to each other. They exchange ideas. And so they usually come in with a really great, tight argument for what they want and why they want it. And so I just use it as a learning opportunity and then say yes.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting what you said about them not wanting to give $100,000 to one artist because of the rivalry and competition that it would stoke. I think competition is such an underrated and under-discussed feature of artistic production. Like having a rivalry, someone explained this to me, having a rival is like someone to always check, like someone that you can always, will keep you moving. And, is just kind of like your bar to clear and it keeps you moving forward. How does that exist among collectors?
Well, one of the if you read the literature about collecting, one of the impulses behind collecting is always sort of to one-upmanship the guy next to you. I own the Basquiat and I got it and Jarl didn't, or I got I went into this, show of, new artists down at, David Kordansky and I got to buy one and Jarl didn't. And so there's a lot of that one-upsmanship about collectors. I will say that I think the group of serious collectors, which is to say people who are really engaged in the art and with the artists and thinking about art and conversing about art and collecting it seriously personally, I don't find that as much among that group of people. I can't imagine really, Jarl competing for a work. I would never do that. I mean, sell it to Jarl or whatever. I mean, but because status is not one of the things that drives me. I'm sure there's lots of other things that we can talk about what those are, because there's lots of other literature about what underlies collecting. But it's not competition for me. But I think it's very, very...
It exists.
The art world operates on it. I mean, the galleries, right? I mean, they operate on you having anxiety that you're not gonna. They're gonna up your anxiety level so you don't get this thing, and it's good salesmanship.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's because of what I collect or how I collect. I've never felt in all the years that I've collected that in any way I have been competing with any other collector for a particular work. No gallery has ever made me feel that way. I would say, and I feel strongly about supporting institutions, what has happened numerous times is they'll say it's on hold, and I'll say, oh, okay. And it'll say, but it's an institution. And I said, oh, well,
give it to them.
An institution should have this work of art.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only friction I have found as a collector. Generally speaking, the galleries have been, it's either something that's spoken for because it's going to to a museum, or they give me the opportunity to buy it.
You're lucky than I, because I've had a lot of, well, not a lot, but I've run into a lot of the, we're taking interest. Have you not run across the we're taking interest?
I want to hear
line?
all the things the gallerists say to you. I want to hear all of these kind of phrases.
I can't be wrong, but we're taking interest is one of the main ones. I think Andrea Rosen. I have way too long a historical memory, unfortunately. But my memory is that the first person to come up with this was Andrea Rosen, who, when people wanted a John Curran, or who I think she was representing at the time and was highly desirable, he probably still is, he's a wonderful artist, but, came up with the "we're taking interest" line.
What does that mean?
Means, tell us you're interested, we'll gather everybody we know, plus everybody we want to know, and then there'll be 6 paintings available, and we'll apportion them to whoever we want. And if your interest may actually, it won't, because if you're the guy who gets that we're taking interest, chances are you're not getting the work.
Wow.
But it was a way of sort of saying, well, if we really appreciate the fact that you want to buy one. There's a lot of demand for it, and we'll see how things turn out at the end. And if we really can't find some other sucker for it, maybe we'll turn to you. That's really what it was. And I've seen that phrase spread over the course of a decade or two, to like dozens of guys, to like some young gallery in Lower East Side who's got 3 artists. If somebody says to me, "We're taking interest," I said, well, then my answer is
goodbye.
I don't have any.
I mean, what do you do? Do you just kind of like walk away at that point? Is it something that you hear as well?
I used to. When
Things have changed.
I used to hear it. I don't remember. I have not heard of it as lately. For a long time. But yeah, I did hear that early on. I've forgotten.
Have things changed?
Totally forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Dean mentioned it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did hear that.
Yeah, when you become when your profile as a collector rises, do you feel like things change a little bit?
Well, of course.
Oh.
Of course, yeah.
Sure.
They're running a business. It's a retail business. Some of them are better focused on career development than the retail aspect of it. They're thinking about career management, which I think I appreciate, and I think is not practiced as much as I'd love to see. But it is a retail business, and they want to know that you're going to be that you are a serious collector, and what's your philosophy on keeping an artist or promoting an artist or buying an artist in depth? Are you going to turn around and sell it tomorrow? Things of that sort. I think those are the things that they take into consideration. That's just not the way I collect, so it's never been an issue for me. But I think that's one of the reasons they. But yeah, look, the more it's like anything. If you're buying wine, if you're buying jewelry, if you're buying sports cars, you buy a lot of them. People start to pay more attention.
Yeah, people notice.
It's retail.
Yeah,
it's retail. It's like going to the same restaurant. You get treated much more nicely if you
get the good table.
If you go back, and so I've never had an issue with that. I think it's that's the way it should be. If I'm spending a lot of money at a gallery, or somebody's spending a lot of money at a gallery, I have no objection to take care of their customer first. That somebody who spent a lot of money as opposed to me, who maybe shows up once every 2 years saying, "Oh, I like that artist in this group show. Can I buy it?" When they have 20 other, buyers who maybe have spent more money and more attention on that gallery. So I think it's only reasonable. Is just So I just wish the process were a little bit cleaner, more direct, and less bullshitty. Which I'm sure is true for a lot of things in the art world. But
when did you start collecting?
Boy, you asked me a time question.
Yeah. What year was it?
Do you know when we
when
had
was your lunch? Yeah.
Must have been around 23, 20, somewhere around.
Oh, no, it had to be earlier than that.
Then it must have been.
Because the first big work, I've had 3 phases. The first phase, and Dean warned me about this. It was another great.
Oh, tell me everything.
And I always, when I talk to people that are interested in collecting now, I talk about my personal experiences. When you're first starting, one of the hardest things to do is the recommendations. Really look at a lot of art first before you start to buy. I think it's difficult when you start to get moved and really like something and want it to say no. I'm gonna wait a couple of years before I actually start writing checks. I think it's an easy piece of advice to offer, and I think it's a very difficult piece of advice to follow. And I think that a lot of it is one of the reasons is our tastes change. And in my particular case, not only did my taste change, but I didn't really know what I wanted to collect yet. When I sat down with Dean, I said, I want to collect art, but I didn't have a fully formed idea in my head about what that would be. And maybe it's because of my background in marketing, I like the idea of having a collection that stands for something, that means something, that has a unified theme. I didn't know what mine would be. I said sooner or later it's going to raise its head. So I think there was a period of time for maybe 5 or 6 years where I was buying a little of this, a little of that, a painting here, a sculpture there. No real thesis, no real direction. And then all of a sudden I was in New York. It was then Zorner Worth, and I saw John McCracken's show, outdoor stainless steel work, and I saw a work that just blew my mind. And this would have been the end of 99, the beginning of 2000, somewhere in there.
That makes sense.
And I went, that's what I want to collect. And that was the beginning of the minimalist light and space collection. So I had, 5 years, 6 years of, an amalgamation of stuff, none of it particularly noteworthy. Although I will say the first art I bought, I'm still very proud of and I still own. I bought 3 Larry Clark photographs from the Tulsa series of junkies in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I was so excited. I came home and I showed my wife, it's these junkies shooting up, pregnant woman in a rocking chair shooting up. And my wife says, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? We're not going to hang this up in the house. We had 2 young kids. And I said, oh, no, this is fantastic. I love dark. These are dark. And she goes, oh, no. You can't. They're not going up in the house. I put them into storage. And then my oldest daughter, Katrina, who's now is now kind of in the art world. She's on the board of ICA here. She was going to the School of the Art Institute for her graduate degree in Chicago. She goes, Dad, I'd kind of like those photographs. And so they got hung in her apartment, and it went like full circle, and she had them for years. And then she came back at one point and said, when she had her son, who is now 6 years old, they got to go back into storage.
So it's like still in the family.
Yeah, Larry Clark's sentimental value.
They're great though.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I wonder about. I wanted to ask you about the process of finding yourself as a collector, figuring out who you like and what your identity of your collection is going to be. And it sounds like you two both have very different approaches. You don't have a defining theme of your collection, right?
I don't. It's interesting because at one point. I think I learned about myself in the collection. So I at one point, some 5 or 6 years after I began collecting, I realized that 7 or 8 pieces in the house were images of the sea, which I'd been completely unconscious of when I had bought these works one way or the other. And so there was clearly something in that image that spoke to me. And increasingly over the years, I find themes that appeal to me. I've never collected that way. I engage with individual works of art, and if I like it, and if I can afford it, and if I can buy it, I buy it, and that's it. And so it tends to be, I won't say indiscriminate, but there's no guiding theme. I went through moments and periods where it was more a more unified view, like 2004 to 2010, where I was really, really heavily collecting conceptual works, especially California conceptual works.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really gotten into.
Like who?
Douglas Hubler and Herr Van Elk and Alan Ruppersberg, early Rouché, early Rouché stuff. There were a whole bunch of artists, Robert Cummings, who some of whom are, I won't say lost to history, but are fairly obscure at this point. And I over time, as I kept buying the work and engaging with it, I realized that I had a profound dislike of conceptualism and minimalism. And with
my next question is, you don't like the same things? Like,
no, I'm sure we don't.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my closest friends, Mark Selwyn, who's a gallerist who you know very well and who has a wonderful collection, a wonderful eye. We joke about this all the time because I walk into his house and there's not a single thing in his house, which is mostly minimalist and conceptual, that I would ever want to have anything to do with. And vice versa, I'm sure. And yet, when we both look at a work of art, we're both capable of understanding why it's a important work of art.
Yeah, even if it's
not
not
engaging.
for you.
And so the answer is that for me, as I thought about my own reaction to it, as I was looking at minimalism and conceptualism, I wound up having huge philosophical issues with the underpinnings of that work. The artists that I really, came to admire most over time were not that. So anyway, I that collection, I mostly donated it, and is gone. And I kind of delved back into the emerging art of my own time. I don't want to piss on. I'm just speaking for me personally in terms of my own engagement with the work and why I, in the end, turned my back on it. That's why.
You have different feelings about minimalism and light and space.
Well, that's the great thing about art. Any type of art, whether we're talking about the visual arts or music or theater, dance, film. I mean, if everybody loved it, it would be beige carpeting.
No, that's what I think.
And so I really appreciate it. I love one of my, to use a tech bro term, one of my intellectual hacks used to be when I was working for a living or when I had a problem that I was facing was to go look at art I didn't like because I'm really comfortable in what I like. And it's soothing to me, even if the work itself is not, visually soothing, because it's familiar. We all love familiar things. But I find looking at art that is disturbing to me or not comfortable or not something I like or in a medium I don't particularly care for, and I really look at it, it helps me unlock something subconsciously, I guess, in my brain. And so I think there's great value in that.
We've come to this point where we feel like art should please us, that art should be pleasant and not uncomfortable. And I feel like it's a way to make art very conservative or very boring. People are not taking risks.
Well, when I started collecting, there was nobody out there, very few people collecting in Los Angeles at the time. So as I've said before, I had a lot of time to spend with gallerists and who had no customers, and most of the gallerists were incredibly sophisticated people and incredibly knowledgeable about art, like Stuart Reagan and Tom Solomon, and whose families had, who'd been collecting art for many years and showed really amazing artists. And this is in the mid '90s, and I remember I don't remember if it was Stuart or Tom or one of them had said to me, like, look, the key to collecting art is to buy stuff you don't like. And I thought, well, that's a rabbit hole. I don't know that I can go down. But what they meant was that it's the stuff that makes you uncomfortable is worth the second look, and maybe a third look, and maybe a fourth look, and that's proved to be sort of true over time. That it was not the stuff that attracted me at first blush that was good. I've often collected that stuff, and almost invariably it turns out that it was not the right thing to do. Whereas the stuff that was really unpleasant and difficult, and it was the stuff that made me go, like that turned out to have a longer shelf life for me. And I don't know if you found the same thing.
Yeah, well, my background before art and before television was radio, and music was what drew me to radio. And I started my career as a disc jockey. That's what I did. And so I spent a lot of time. I like to think about, the through lines or the analogies. But in music, it's that really catchy pop song. The first time you hear it, you love it. You go, my God, that is catchy. I love it. And you listen to it 3 or 4 or 5 times, or you put it on repeat, and pretty soon you can't stand it. And on the other hand, there are other, and I when I made the transition as a programmer, as a disc jockey from top 40 radio into, what was then called album rock. Now,
what's album rock?
Classic rock.
Okay.
Now it's classic rock. But there were a lot of really spectacular artists, music artists, who did not test well at first, did not test well at all, because their music was a bit more sophisticated. It wasn't easy. Now, we listen to the Police today because we're so familiar with it. It's hard for us to envision that anybody would have responded that way.
A world where they were like avant-garde or
Talking Heads, same thing.
Yeah.
And I think the visual arts are the same.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. If you like it that much, that fast, it probably doesn't have very much staying power.
I think that's what art history is, right? It's like a series of every time somebody opened a new door into a new path, that they were doing something different rather than... Yeah, art history is not made of people who are doing like familiar things. It's people who broke rules and, made new things possible. We have collectors. We forget that they have like these other lives. They have these other careers that we kind of take for granted. Like, I would love to hear more about your relationship with reality TV.
Well, I didn't, only to the extent that, when I was at E, we did a lot of reality-based, or I should say non-scripted television. But
what were the early like reality TV shows in E?
Well, at E,
like when did Kardashians begin?
That's later.
That was later. That was after I left. So I can't take
take credit for the Kardashians.
I can't take any great credit for that. My biggest television hit, I wear this as a badge of honor, was when we started E. When we launched it, it had been Movie Time. And Movie Time was short form. And having come from MTV and learned the hard way with music videos that the viewer's making a decision every 4 minutes. I like that clip. I don't like that clip. I like that clip. It was great the first time I saw it. Now I've seen it too many times. I'm tired of it. And so the music video form, did not have staying power for a long period of time. So when we went to Movie Time, and transformed it and renamed it E, Entertainment Television, I said we have to do longer form. We have to find a way to keep people not making 4-minute decisions about whether they're going to stay or go. At any rate, I said, here's the budget. We have a very limited budget. I need 6 30-minute shows. And I'm looking at the lineup and I'm going, I said, no, I'm not the greatest at math, but that looks like 5 shows, not 6. And she said, yeah, we didn't have enough money for 6 shows. I said, well, you got to have 6 shows because we're going to run 3 hours, 6 half-hour shows, and then we're going to flip it and run it again for 3 hours, and then add the 2 ratings up, and that's how we're going to sell it. Well, we don't have any more money. Well, you got to give me more money. I don't have any more money. So one thing led to another. I said, we've got to come up with something that's going to be incredibly inexpensive to do, just as a filler. And I remember at that time, and again, this had to be 1990, right around 1990. There was a moment, I think it was on Geraldo Rivera. He had some skinheads on. And they got in an argument, and one of the skinheads
I remember that.
picked up a folding chair and threw it at him and hit him. And everybody was mesmerized by it. They took this clip, and they were you could turn on any news show, and you'd see Geraldo Rivera getting bopped over the head with a folding metal chair by one of these skinheads. And then I realized there was this whole thing going on out there. Jerry Springer, Sally Jesse Raphael, Jenny Jones, Geraldo Rivera, Maury Povich. There were tons and tons of these shows, and every one of them had that moment, the reveal where, the guy finds out that the wife finds out that the guy is having an affair with her sister, or that moment.
He's not the father.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not the father. Mm-hmm. Every show, every day had one of those moments. And I was going, so I'm thinking, how can I make something for no dollars? And so I said to the programming team, I remember the meeting, let's take that outrageous moment from each one of these shows every day, string them together. We'll have a funny host. We'll shoot it in front of a blue screen, and there'll be no set. There'll be a stool, a blue screen, and clips that are for free because we're going to use it to promote the next day's show. So we didn't have to pay for the clips. So it costs nothing. Everybody hated the idea.
Oh my God.
They thought it was the worst idea ever. I said, I don't even think it's a great idea, but we can do this thing for $2,000, $3,000 a half hour. Yeah, it's going to be crazy. We need a half hour. I said, I'll make you a deal. If you can do a show for the same amount of money as this one, we'll go with your idea, not with my idea. And it's not because I love my idea. And they couldn't come up with anything. So we had 6 shows. There was 1 hit, and that was it.
You invented Talk Soup.
I did. That's my key to fame. And I didn't even like it. It was like many things, it was out of desperation.
Well, you guys have both talked about how there used to be very few collectors in LA, and now there are many. The art world has grown so much, right? If, looking out into the sea of collectors, are there any kind of rookie mistakes that you see that you would like to correct, or advice you would give besides, looking at art a lot is important, but is there anything more granular you might say?
I think I would say exactly the same thing that I said to Jarl, which is go out there and look. The mistake, or it's not a mistake, but the what I found is among a lot of, because I get called a lot by people in Hollywood who are starting to collect. It's like because they've heard about me, or and I'm very cheap. I'm a very cheap art consultant, and I'm always happy to give advice. And what I find is that a lot of people are a lot of the Hollywood collectors are overly influenced by all sorts of things except looking at the art and finding a pathway for them into it. They're collecting what other people are collecting. They're collecting what they're told to collect, and they're collecting what they think will appreciate hugely in value. And all so much of the motivations, I think, really in the end will lead them to abandoning it, because it's not really, from a financial standpoint, it's really not ultimately a fabulous investment, despite what anybody says, or certainly there are better ones. And so if you're doing it for the money, if you're doing it for the status, there's probably other ways of accumulating status as well. And so it's a very expensive way to do something, if to achieve those ends, if that's what you want to do. And I think the best way to do it is to do it in a way that gives you pleasure, and find that pleasure point for you. And I think that's really the main thing. I mean, there were a lot of, in the last 5 years, I've had lunch and dinners with a lot of people, and they've all wound up collecting the same, 5 or 6 artists that everybody who's been collecting for, I just bought one of these, and it's depressing, because already 2 or 3 of them have dropped out, and because it's just not very satisfying, and in the end, that is not satisfying. You get whacked upside the head because all of a sudden some guy's prices at auction, you're looking, every day, oh God, it's gone up. It's like a stock, it's gone up. Oh, but last auction, it sold for $300,000, and then all of a sudden an auction comes up and it sells for $12,000, and the market's done. And so I think a lot of, I think, yes, it's broadened here. I think the trick is to get people to, some of that is education and talking to people to get them to connect with the real thing. Like, why is art meaningful to you? That's my...
I agree. There's so many different ways somebody can collect art. And because I love artists, and I love the community of artists, and I love this community of artists particularly, I think anybody that buys any art for any reason whatsoever, in my mind, is a hero, even if they only do it for 5 minutes. I hope they would do it for longer. But I think finding the right reason for collecting, which is what I was hearing and what Dean was saying, which is, not being one of the tech bros that's, that's done really well and says, I figured it out in business over here. I'm going to figure it out in art, and I'm going to make a lot of money on this thing. There are very few people that have done that, and that it's a bit of a crime because it can be so much fun. It can be so exciting, and I would ask anybody that's thinking about collecting art to really understand and ask themselves why it is they're doing it. And if they don't ultimately get to the answer of, I really am inspired by and love to have beautiful objects or artworks around me, and I want to have a sense of discovery, and I'm committed to it for a long period of time, I would almost, and this is going to sound like heresy, discourage them from it, because I think that's the only, I would like to see people collecting for long periods of time, spending decades and decades. And I don't necessarily mean, buying expensive blue chip stuff, making a collection of, even if it's folk art or if it's something, but things that inspire them on a day-to-day basis. I remember talking to another collector when I first was beginning, and I said, but you have this work up in your home. Doesn't it just become invisible to you after a while? And again, I was just starting out. And this collector said, no, every single day when I walk by this work, I look at it. And at the time, I said to myself, that's bullshit. That can't be true. But it is. And every time I walk down the hallway in my house, when I go from my bedroom downstairs into the kitchen for coffee, and I look at the same work over and over and over and over again, I get a thrill from it. And if people, I would just hope that they would consider that when they think about collecting and all the reasons. I want something that's going to fit over the 7-foot couch, and I'd like it in green. I would hope they would think about what their real passion is. Is it really going to be ignited? Are they going to be in it for the long haul? And I hope that's what they would do.